Every night in Jefferson County, Missouri, as the streets emptied and storefronts flicked off their lights one by one, a single door near the back of St. James Regional Hospital creaked open at precisely 10 p.m. Through it stepped a man named Harry Nolan, though hardly anyone knew his name. He was older, though no one could say exactly how old, somewhere between 60 and 70, maybe more, maybe less. He moved with the deliberateness of someone who had been taught, long ago, that haste was dangerous. Harry wore the same thing every night, a plain, dark blue smock and a faded baseball cap with no logo, pulled low over his brow. His shoes were silent, his gait unhurried. A thermos was sometimes tucked under his arm when he arrived, though few ever saw him drink from it. He signed no logbooks. He clocked in nowhere. Yet by morning, the hospital floors shone with such meticulous polish that it seemed the building itself had exhaled during the night. He never interrupted, never offered advice or asked questions. He worked around the emergency staff with an uncanny knack for being invisible. Orderlies would turn a corner and find the bins already emptied. Nurses pulling double shifts noticed that handrails were disinfected before they even requested it. Sometimes, new staff members would ask who the janitor on third shift was, usually during early morning rounds when the halls were spotless, but the answer was always vague. An old guy. Been here for years. Nobody really knew how long. There were rumors. Some said he was a veteran who never fully came back from the war. Others thought he was someone the hospital had taken pity on, maybe allowed to sleep in a storage room in exchange for cleaning up. No one could prove either. His name wasn't listed on the staff registry. He had no ID badge. The only trace of him, officially, was a neat signature, H. Nolan, scrawled in pen on the handwritten cleaning log kept in a clipboard on the supply room door. In the break rooms, young interns sometimes told stories about him in the lull between trauma cases. One nurse said she saw him cleaning an oar at 4 in the morning, even though it had been locked for renovation. Another swore he didn't speak English, despite having once seen him reading an old copy of Stars and Stripes tucked into his bag. No one could remember where he came from, or when he started, or even who had hired him. But there was something else, something quieter, more difficult to explain. Each night, as Harry made his way through the third-floor corridor, he would slow down at the entrance to the ICU. Just outside the double doors, behind the glass partition, he would pause. For a few seconds, no more, he stood perfectly still. His eyes fixed on the rows of beds, machines blinking softly in the low light, nurses adjusting tubes and typing charts. No one ever saw him enter. He never touched the doors or leaned too close. But those few seconds each night became a pattern. Like a ritual. His eyes would find one corner of the ward, always the same, and rest there. Then he would turn, lift his mop again, and continue as if nothing had happened. No one questioned it. Not because they understood, but because it was easy not to notice what was quiet. The hospital at night was a place of contrasts. Alarms pinged gently in the distance while Harry swept beneath the buzz of aging fluorescent lights. Life and death passed each other in wheelchairs, and Harry moved between them with a kind of grace that required no recognition. The clatter of gurneys, the shuffle of exhausted interns, the groan of elevator doors, he moved through it all like wind through a sleeping field. There was a kind of gentleness to the way he worked. He never banged a mop bucket against the wall or let trash cans rattle when he emptied them. In rooms where patients slept, he pulled the door slowly and walked toe to heel, never once letting the wheels on his cleaning cart squeal. In an environment built on urgency and alarm, Harry brought stillness. Not laziness. Not delay. Just stillness. Some nights, he passed a nurse crying quietly near the medicine cabinet, or a young resident staring blankly into a coffee cup. He never asked questions, never paused. But those who found themselves in his silent orbit often felt, inexplicably, steadier afterward. As if his presence absorbed some of the panic the night tended to produce. Nobody ever saw him eat. He never took breaks in the staff lounge. No one remembered ever seeing him leave. But by morning, when the day staff filtered in with fresh scrubs and clunky clipboards, the halls bore his signature. Floors free of footprints. Trash bins lined neatly. Even the vending machines had their smudged buttons wiped clean. And on the cleaning log, beneath each date, the initials H. Nolan. Sometimes, the security guard on the early shift would find the American flag on the front lawn resecured after a windy night, though the maintenance team hadn't been scheduled. And once, during a snowstorm, someone salted the walkway before the arrival of the first nurse, but no footprints led away. When asked, no one could remember a time before he worked there. He didn't seem to age. He didn't seem to change. But always, every night, he would pause at that same glass panel outside the ICU. His hands resting gently on the mop handle. His shoulders rising with a breath, then falling with something more than air. It was never enough to draw attention. But it was enough to make one wonder. What, exactly, was he remembering? The storm had arrived before midnight, pulling long fingers of wind across Jefferson County and pressing rain like needles against the windows of St. James Regional. By 2 a.m., the ER was full, slick roads had delivered a string of minor accidents, flu patients huddled beneath thin hospital blankets, and the nurses moved briskly between beeping monitors and soaked umbrellas. Harry Nolan was where he always was, quiet in the corners, mop gliding across the floor in wide, practiced strokes. The storm didn't change his rhythm. Rain was just weather. Weather was just time. In the lull between emergencies, a paramedic shouted for intake. A man was being wheeled through the doors on a gurney, oxygen mask covering a face pale with strain. He was older, late 70s, wrapped in a navy blue coat now soaked through. An Army insignia patch clung to one shoulder. The monitor clipped to his finger pulsed too fast, the readings sharp and worrisome. Colonel Dale Hansen. Retired. 2 tours in Vietnam. 1 leg with metal pins. 1 heart now betraying him. As the gurney rolled past, Harry looked up from his mop. Their eyes met. It was no more than a second. But in that moment, recognition passed between them, not uncertain, not questioning. Colonel Hansen didn't blink. His chest rose sharply beneath the mask. His hand twitched at his side. Then the team pushed the gurney through triage and down the hall. It wasn't until hours later, stabilized and resting with 4 lines running into the blue veins of his hands, that Colonel Hansen asked to speak with administration. The request came with unexpected urgency. They humored him. Veterans often made odd demands when under stress. They expected a complaint, perhaps about the cold coffee or the bustle of the nurses. But what Hansen said startled the young administrator into silence. The janitor, he said, the one mopping the hallway when he was brought in. That wasn't a janitor. That's Captain Jackson Reeves, Hansen insisted, his voice hoarse but firm. 3rd Battalion. 45th Medevac. Afghanistan. 2007, presumed Kia. The administrator offered a confused shake of the head, but Hansen waved him off and pointed to the door. Find your HR records. I'll wait. The search began that morning. At first, it turned up nothing. No file under Nolan, no W-2, no tax forms. He wasn't on payroll. The facilities manager was called in. He scratched his head and said Harry had been there since before his time, maybe 6, 7 years. He'd always been there. Someone must have approved him. They checked cleaning contracts. Maintenance logs. Nothing. Only a signature on the clipboard near the janitor's closet. The name scribbled at the bottom of each shift, H. Nolan. They called security. Asked if anyone had ever checked for ID. No one had. At the same time, the administrator did what any child of the internet age would do. He ran the name Captain Jackson Reeves through a database. And that's when things began to shift. The photo was grainy. Old. But there was no mistaking it. A military group sh*T, 10 men in fatigues, dust on their boots and weariness in their eyes. Back row, standing tall, Captain Reeves. Younger, yes. Beard trimmed, face leaner. But the eyes hadn't changed. Neither had the stillness in his shoulders. Beneath the image, a line of text. Captain Jackson M. Reeves, Medevac Unit Commander. Presumed Kia, 2007. The rest came quickly. They pulled declassified mission records. The final report described an ambush extraction mission northeast of Jalalabad. The helicopter had been downed. Reeves had ordered the crew to evaluate undercover while he provided fire support. Multiple injuries. 8 lives saved. Explosion confirmed. Body never recovered. His name had been etched into the wall of a military memorial. He had a folded flag. A plaque in a New Jersey high school. Yet here he was, alive, and mopping floors in Missouri. The pieces unraveled slowly, like stitches being cut from a long-healed wound. It was the colonel's insistence that led to the full inquiry. The VA got involved. An old Social Security number was traced to a civilian medical intake from 2008. A John Doe, listed as injured and suffering memory loss, processed through a trauma unit in Arkansas. No family claimed him. Eventually discharged to a shelter. From there, no clear record. Just a man lost in the gaps of systems not built for exceptions. When a hospital in Missouri needed help cleaning its underfunded hallways, someone had hired him. No questions asked. No references required. Years passed. His name changed. Or maybe he chose a name that felt right. Harry Nolan. A quiet cover for a man who had once called airstrikes under fire. When confronted with the evidence, Harry didn't argue. He didn't resist. He simply nodded and said that Captain Reeves had died in the ravine that day. He didn't deserve to return under that name. Others had died better. The Department of Veterans Affairs reactivated his file. Compensation was reissued. Medals were restored. An offer was made for a ceremony in Washington. He declined. He didn't want speeches. He didn't want cameras. All he asked was to keep the job. And to be allowed to raise the hospital flag at dawn. They agreed. But word spread. And the hospital that had once passed him in silence began to slow down when he entered the room. Some staff stood when he walked by. Others began leaving folded notes on the janitor's cart. Thank you. We remember. You were never forgotten. And every morning now, without fail, just before the day shift arrived, Harry, Captain Reeves, paused at the same ICU window. Only now, the look in his eyes wasn't just memory. It was peace. The seasons changed slowly in Jefferson County. Snow melted into spring rain, then into summer heat, then again into the amber quiet of fall. But within the walls of St. James Regional Hospital, a different kind of change took root, one that wasn't driven by weather, but by memory. After the quiet unveiling of his identity, Harry Nolan, Captain Jackson Reeves, became something else in the eyes of those who worked there. Not a symbol, not a headline. Something gentler. Something humbler. A reminder. Of what had been forgotten. Of what still mattered. He kept to his routine, refusing interviews and publicity. The media lost interest quickly, disappointed that the man who cheated death didn't want to relive it. He never discussed the war. Never attended ceremonies. When a local congressman came to shake his hand in front of cameras, Jackson offered a nod, then politely returned to scrubbing the base of the waiting room chairs. It wasn't stubbornness. It was clarity. The kind that comes only from surviving things that don't leave visible scars. The hospital allowed him to formalize his role, honorary keeper of shift, they called it, and though the title was ceremonial, the weight behind it was not. He declined the new uniform they offered. Kept the smock, kept the cap. But he accepted one thing, a small key to the roof. Each morning at precisely 7 a.m., he took the narrow stairwell alone, thermos in hand, and unlocked the metal door to the sky. There, on a flagpole few had noticed before, he raised the American flag. The movement was exact, crisp, and silent. Not a ceremony, not a performance, just duty, carried out with reverence. At first, no one watched. Then, a nurse, new to the night shift, followed him out of curiosity. Then 2 others. Then a few more. Eventually, a group of children, sons and daughters of hospital staff, began to gather in the early light, drawn by the quiet rhythm of something they couldn't yet name but somehow understood. He never spoke during these mornings. But afterward, if asked, he would kneel next to one of the children and show them how to fold the flag properly, corner to corner, triangle by triangle, until it was tucked away like memory in a drawer. He taught them how to stand still, how to listen, even when no one was speaking. And sometimes, when a young hand asked why the flag mattered so much, he would pause, not with confusion, but with the weight of everything that question carried, and place a hand on his heart. A local medical college heard about him and quietly added a seminar series titled Service Without Applause. Students attended in silence, taking notes not on strategy or biology, but on presence, humility, and endurance. The plaque came a year later. Small. Bronze. Affixed just beside the hospital's main entrance. It read, "He asked for no recognition. He simply continued to serve." No one knew who paid for it, but everyone knew who it was for. And so time moved on. But with a softness now, a certain hush in the halls during the early hours, as if the building itself had adopted his stillness. Years passed. Jackson Reeves aged quietly. The mop began to lean more against the wall. The pauses at the ICU window grew longer. His thermos became lighter. One winter, he fell ill and spent a few days in a quiet corner room, room 203, the nurses said. The staff took turns sitting with him, though he insisted they treat him like anyone else. A nurse left his thermos filled each morning. A child taped a drawing of an American flag to the foot of his bed. A doctor placed a bronze coin, inscribed with his battalion number, on the side table, beside a single folded towel. He recovered. But not fully. The roof stairs became too much. So a young orderly named Mason began raising the flag in his place, trained by Jackson himself, every movement taught and memorized. On his last day of work, Jackson passed Mason the small key without a word. Just a nod. When he passed away, quietly, in the early hours of a Thursday morning, the hospital paused. An announcement was never made. But at 7 a.m., 6 hospitals across Missouri raised their flags at the same moment. Not because they were told to, but because word had traveled, not through press releases, but through people. Nurses who had trained at St. James. Interns who had watched the silent man each morning. Children who had grown into adults, now working in new cities, carrying folded corners in their hands. Each flag was raised by someone who had learned from him. There were no salutes. No G** fire. Just silence. And the sound of fabric unfurling in the morning wind. At St. James, the janitor's closet was left untouched. The mop stood against the wall. The clipboard still hung on the door. And beside it, a new edition, framed and simple. A photograph. Not from the battlefield, but from the rooftop. Jackson standing beside the flagpole, one hand resting on the halyard, the other clutching his thermos. No smile. Just presence. And beneath the photograph, 4 words etched in brass. Kindness without question is enough.